Happy Aloha Friday and welcome to another edition of Spotlight Hawaii. I'm Ryan Kalei-Suji, joined by Yanji Denise. We want to thank you for tuning in this morning. And this morning, we're going to be focusing our conversation on schools and specifically our teachers.
That's right. School starts in less than a month. So joining us now is the president of the HSTA. That, of course, is the union that represents all of the teachers and administrators and those who service our schools here in the islands. Osa Tui Jr., who just took the helm of that organization. Welcome.
Aloha, Yunji and Ryan. Thanks so much for having me this morning.
So, as we said, school starts in less than a month. How do teachers feel about heading back to the classroom?
And actually, for a couple of schools, school started yesterday. Our teachers are excited to be back with their students. They're excited to have classrooms where they can focus on students. But some of the concerns are, our children who are less than 12 years old don't have access to vaccines. And if we bring them all back and put them all together, then we have to make sure that they're masked and staying safe. And we assume that parents are going to be concerned as well. And the department hasn't set up anything for parents. If the parent is concerned to bring in their child, what options are there? Our teachers in the past year and a half, year and a quarter, have struggled to teach both online and in person simultaneously at the end of the fourth quarter last year. That really didn't do a service to any of those students. So if we were able to have students who are all in class or a set of students who are all virtual, I think that's what we would want the most. Unfortunately, the department and the Board of Education isn't taking this up until next week, Thursday, and that's a little too late.
Let's also expand on some breaking news that just came out from the CDC, a new ruling saying, or a suggestion that teachers and students that have been vaccinated do not need to wear masks. That just coming out from the CDC this morning. I want to get your thoughts on that, because as you can imagine, there probably will be some confusion over that ruling. There, of course, especially for those in middle school, where some children are able to get the vaccination, and others who may be more younger and in those lower grades may not. How do you think that's going to be managed and facilitated?
Well, school districts around the country now are scrambling to try and figure that out. For the Department of Education, they've made a ruling just prior to that everyone will have to wear a mask when indoors. And right now, I think that that's probably the best course of action at this time, because it's going to be hard to determine who's got the vaccine, who hasn't, and especially in those middle schools where some kids can get it and some kids can't. How do you make that determination? And if some students, have the option not to wear it, then, others are going to be maybe ridiculed, like, oh, you still have to wear your mask. And sometimes the student might not be able to get the vaccine because their parent doesn't want them to get the vaccine. And so there's bullying or something like that. And right now, it's safer to just go everybody, even with a vaccine. The vaccine is not 100% effective. And until we reach herd immunity, it's just best to have all the safety mitigation practices in place at this point in time.
Let's talk a little bit about vaccinations. What is the vaccination buy-in from your members as far as you can tell right now?
Oh, well, we haven't been able to poll them since early February. And in early February, 11,000 of our 13,000 teachers, 70% of them said they had either started to receive their vaccinations or they intended to receive their vaccinations. And so we're very thankful that we were put into Tier 2, where we could get early access to the vaccines. Other states across the country did not allow their teachers to get that early vaccination. And so we're pretty confident that going forward, a lot of teachers have taken advantage of that opportunity to get the vaccine.
Something else that was recently spotlighted and in the headlines this past week was the legislature's override of one of Governor David Ige's vetoes, which would disclose the school where a positive COVID test was found. What are your thoughts on that veto override? Do you agree with the legislature taking this stance, or are you more on the side of the governor and the department that did not want to disclose the school?
We've always been on the side of more transparency. When a parent hears that there's been a case in the complex area, that doesn't help the parent, that doesn't help the family try and make some decisions. And we've had a year of this where there have been cases in schools, and there hasn't been the issue that has been brought up about, people being singled out at a small school. So we're happy that the legislators who understand their communities took this step to override that veto and will bring about more transparency from the Departments of Health and Education.
You know, it seems like the Department of Education has sort of taken a take it or leave it, all or nothing approach to schools this fall. If you don't want to come in person, you don't really have any options. And we talk a lot, of course, about students, but what about the teachers who may have a family member with an existing health condition? We know that there's so many multi-generational families here, and surely there are teachers who live with an elderly relative or perhaps someone with a compromised immune system. What are the options for teachers who don't want to go back into the classroom?
Yes, we do have some teachers that even themselves have issues. Maybe they've had a recent large surgery or things like that. The department has set up a telework option for teachers, especially those that need accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act. However, getting those telework, I've said in other venues that it's kind of like winning the lottery. So it's not very easy to get a telework option, but it is there for those that the department determines it is absolutely necessary.
If a positive case is found on a campus, what is the protocol in place right now? Will students be allowed to be back on campus the next day? Is it going to be confined to the classroom? And what happens to those teachers as well? Will they be forced to do distance learning? And what has the department recommended in those types of situations where a positive case may be found with someone on campus?
Yeah, so in the past year, when there have been cases, they've either had to close the classroom or determine who's been in close proximity. Our principals have been having to act as contact tracers because the Department of Health is not able to do that. And we anticipate that that's going to be the same process going forward because we have not heard anything new from the Department of Health lately.
So what does that actually look like? Then the school would be taught, are all the devices that were handed out last year, do the students still have those devices, and can they quickly transition to distance learning?
That's going to be difficult, especially if you're back in class and you're learning, in a classroom setting, to then suddenly have to go back once again to a digital format. It's not going to be easy. Fortunately, we've had some practice over this past year doing that. So, and I'm not sure. They might find out in the evening, like there's a case, so everyone has to stay home the next day, in which case that's going to make it even more difficult. So we're just going to have to see what happens, and we're waiting for more guidance from the Department of Health. I visited schools, and principals are asking me, hey, what's going on? And they're even in the dark, unfortunately.
Early on in this pandemic, we heard from educators and of course, like so many other industries and occupations, they've had to adjust. But teachers really had to make adjustments to their schedules, to their lifestyles, and being able to teach virtually and make those exceptions and accommodations. We've talked to some teachers who said, after this year, I'm done. They're taking early retirement, or they decided that this was something that they really just couldn't handle anymore. I'm wondering if you had a chance to talk to any of those teachers. What are the concerns that you may be hearing from those that you represent? Do teachers feel that they are getting everything they need to be able to succeed in the classroom or teaching virtually? And is there any concern that we may be losing some teachers with already a teacher shortage, that we may be losing more because of all that has transpired over the past year?
We're absolutely concerned about the teacher shortage. It is chronic. It is continuing. Right now, there are 900 spots in the department that have yet to be filled for this coming school year. Even in our union, a lot of our leaders, they left. As soon as they heard that there were going to be furloughs and pay cuts, they couldn't take the chance. We're fortunately avoiding most of those, but actually our teachers are still taking a small pay cut this coming year because some additional professional development that has been funded in previous years is not going to be funded. So we have a lot of our old-time teachers who are saying, well, if I'm going to be making less money next year and the year after, then there's no point in sticking around to try and help my pension get better. Their pensions are now going to be at the max. And so they're all going to say, no reason for me to stick around. So we're very concerned. We're very alarmed. And there have been a bunch of people who said, I'm just retiring. There's no sense in sticking around.
Let's talk a little bit also about the consequences for families who decide that they don't want to send their kids in person. Right now, when we had Dr. Kishimoto on here, and we know, of course, that she will be exiting very soon, but when she was on, she said, the responsibility is for the family to contact the principal and work something out. What are you hearing about what's being worked out on the ground? And are you concerned that those students might just drop out if there aren't options?
Yes. Well, what are we hearing about what's being set up? Nothing, because the principals are waiting. I spoke to a principal who said, we want to set something up, but when we try to set something up, the department says, well, that's not an approved alternative. And so the schools are stuck with, what do we do? If, because they want to use some type of platform, and they're talking about the K-12 platform, but we want to make sure that our students who are going to be virtual, if they're going to be virtual or have that option, have the option to be taught by a teacher that's here, that's local. We don't want any of this Acellus debacle where, they're just plopped onto a computer, good luck. And so schools are scrambling. If a school has just one kid here, one kid there, we could have combined and we could have figured out how to get them a teacher that's here that can work with a full class of kids who are going to be online, but that just didn't happen. We are in the 21st century, but we're 21 years into the 21st century, and maybe we should be starting to look at maybe standing these things up more on a permanent basis. We have some charter schools that are exclusively online, and they are thriving. Like Hawaii Technology Academy, they've grown from their Waipahu beginnings to all across the state. And there is definitely a desire for more of this.
We know that you are new to this job, but there is also going to be a new person leading the Department of Education. Keith Harayashi will be taking over as interim superintendent coming up here in just a little bit. Wanted to get your thoughts on the naming of Mr. Harayashi into that role as the interim, your experience working with him, if you have any, and just your overall thoughts on this new direction for the department.
I have not been able to work with Principal Harayashi just yet. I'm looking forward to. I have been in small communication with him going forward. We're happy that the leadership of the Department of Education will be somebody who's been on the ground, who's seen, what the actions or inactions of the state leadership have affect the school level. And so he knows very well that the decisions that he make and how they're going to affect the school level. And also, he's done great things at Waipahu High School, and we're hoping that he can do great things for our whole state as well. So I look forward to working with him.
You mentioned that when you had tracked with teachers on their vaccination rates, it sounded like there was about a 70% buy-in. Obviously, we would love to hear updated numbers on that. But do you think that there should be mandatory vaccines for educators as a condition of employment? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's very difficult. It's hard to say that we should mandate it for the educators without having to mandate it for the rest of the school community, other workers in the school, and then even the students. How do you make sure students are humans too, and they can pass it along just as easily? So if we're going to say then that students have to be vaccinated, then we're basically going to be disenfranchising any of those students who don't get the vaccine. And that's going to really do a disservice. And it's probably going to be the most vulnerable populations of our school communities. And some of our students, they may want to get it, but their parents don't want to allow them to get it. So we don't want to hurt the students anymore.
So would you not accept that then as a condition of employment for your members to have to be vaccinated?
We don't have enough teachers as it is. To then say that, sorry, you don't have a vaccine, we don't want you as well. No, that's just not acceptable at this point in time.
And to expand a little more on that, teacher shortages seem to be always an issue for the department, and just being able to continue to build morale and recruit more teachers. What do you think needs to be done in order to not only get teachers, but get quality teachers into these positions? Is it something that needs to be done on a local level, or is it a national search or campaign that needs to happen? What would you like to see to help solve this problem?
You hit upon it, that we really need local teachers to start getting into this profession. It's hard to attract the students to come in and be a teacher as they see the conditions around them, but we really do need more of our local students to say, hey, this is a profession I'm willing to go into. And so what ways do we attract teachers to come into the profession? And a lot of our teachers, the students see like, gosh, they got to have a second job. As soon as school is done, they got to leave to go work their second job. And, I see them at the movie theater scooping popcorn and things like that. And nobody wants to have that kind of a life. They want to be able to focus on just one profession. And I'll just give a little anecdote. When I was a student teacher, one of the students didn't want to pay attention in class. And then when I came in and started teaching, the other teacher, who was Japanese, said, "Hey, how come you're paying attention to Mr. Tui but not paying attention to me?" And the student, who, they don't care about being politically correct, the student said, "Miss, he's my race." And, what we really need is a lot more local people, Hawaiians, the coast and rural places in the state. We need more teachers of local descent to be able to stand there and be role models for our students. So that's what I hope going forward.
One of the challenges, of course, for teachers coming back is they're going to be facing such a diverse student population in terms of learning. Over the last year, we had some kids who engaged very well online, and then others who really didn't, weren't able to, perhaps through no fault of their own. Maybe they had connectivity issues. Maybe the learning environment at home just didn't work. So, we've heard a lot about this sort of lost year for some students, that there will be these learning gaps. What are your concerns for the teachers if you're facing a classroom where the skill level is so varied? What support is being given to teachers so that they can address the deficiencies in learning?
Well, when we have a qualified teacher in the classroom, they are a professional. Teachers get new students all the time. At my school, McKinley High School, we get students that come in from China, and they come in and they're too old to be in the middle school, too old to be elementary, so they just come in. And our teachers, as professionals, determine where the students are, determine where the students need to be, and if they are unencumbered, they can get the students there. But there are so many things that sometimes block that ability, with regard to maybe like standardized testing, things like that. We spend so much time on getting kids ready for a standardized test that it doesn't address the whole student. And if teachers just have the ability to do what they need to do to get the students where they are, they're professionals, and that's what we do. That's what we do every day.
Another concern, or another thing that has been impacted, I should say, in the school schedule by this pandemic has just been overall gatherings and group gatherings. We know that those types of gatherings are pretty important in a school setting, whether it be just getting together in a cafeteria or doing a school rally or sporting events. What are your thoughts on the direction and the recommendations that are being made moving forward for those types of larger events? Because we know that for many, school is more than just sitting in the classroom. It's the overall experience. How are you going to be able, how do you think the department needs to be able to ensure the safety of both teachers and students while congregating and having this amount of people together in these given spaces?
Yeah, that's a great question. My principal had the exact same question when I talked to him the other day. How are we going to have our opening school year rally or things like that? And so things might have to be different for a while. They might have to have 4 separate rallies so that you can have maybe just 1/4 of the students in the auditorium or the gym at any given time. I'm sure our administrators are going to figure that out, but we're not ready just yet to go back to how we used to be. It's not, that's a little too close for comfort when you're shoving thousands of students onto bleachers and at sporting events. So we need to understand we're not at herd immunity yet. We're not ready to get to that level just yet.
Taking it from thousands of students even down to 20 or 30 in a classroom, we know that Hawaii's classrooms have been overcrowded for some time, and the ventilation is not always what it needs to be. We heard a lot for years and years about need for air conditioning in classrooms. We had Dr. Kemble on, who's the epidemiologist for the state, talking about how they're encouraging, where possible, to increase ventilation. Do you feel like there's enough done just on that kind of practical level? Do schools have the guidance that they need to implement whatever safety protocols they can when it comes to at least opening windows and having access to outdoor spaces and knowing how far students need to be? Because right now it's sort of unclear. It sounds like it's sort of school by school and where possible, but social distancing doesn't sound like it's part of this equation in any sort of standardized way.
You're correct. The department has volumes of things that they're putting out, but going through those things and addressing them with fidelity is an issue. For example, they say you should be turning on, if you have an air conditioning system in your school, It should be turned on a couple hours before school and a couple hours after school. Well, then the department says, well, we don't have someone to come in to turn it on a couple hours before school, a couple hours after school. So there are issues like that. They're distributing box fans to classes, and it's kind of just like we're doing it to say that we did it. They also have these other devices. They're giving like 2 to a school. Good luck figuring out where to place those 2 items to take care of the ventilation systems. And so some of our air conditioning units need high-level adjustments and UV filters and things like that it's just not happening. So there is a definite concern about the ventilation in our schools, and then as well as the heat in our schools. So, what do we do? Open the windows, close the windows. There's a lot of confusion still remaining.
We know that you are just beginning in this role and that you are trying to navigate through this pandemic like so many, others in our community. But moving forward and looking at what you hope to bring to this organization in and under your leadership, what are some of your goals or some of the things that you would like to accomplish during this time, having now the opportunity to maybe set an agenda of how you can help shepherd the needs of the teachers and work with the department?
Yeah, so I think I've touched upon some of them going forward. We want to make sure that we're able to attract and retain, especially local teachers. But if they come from outside, being able to retain them. Some of them come in just a couple of years and they think it's going to be surf, sun, and sand, and I'm just going to go teach for a little while and enjoy myself. And then the harsh reality hits them when they go to the supermarket. And then it's time to have a family and like, oh, I got to go, bye. And so that just constant churn, if we don't have those openings all the time, that's something we want to make sure we can plug those pukas and plug them with local teachers. And, in order to attract teachers, we have to make sure that salaries are competitive and that we're not 50th out of 50 in the country when you factor in the cost of living.
We mentioned at the top that school starts in less than a month. You pointed out that some schools have already started some instruction. What needs to happen right now to make sure that when this flood of students actually come back and are all in the classroom, that these teachers have what they need? What just practical steps in the next 2 to 3 weeks. What do teachers need?
Correct. So they need to make sure that there's PPE. Need to make sure that there's appropriate cleaning and masks that are available to give to students. Now that you're going to have a full classroom of students, you have to make sure that they have what they need. And like we talked about earlier, if a case exists, we're going to have to be able to set up some type of distance learning option on a dime. And so being able to make sure that we can do that in an appropriate way is vitally important.
We know that there is frustration on your end with some of the things that the department has laid out or the procedures that they've taken. And we've heard this from teachers for some time now. But we also have heard from Dr. Kishimoto, and she spoke in our last conversation about the frustration she's had with the legislature about cuts in funding to schools and to the public education system overall. She was disappointed with the way in which the legislature decided to handle some measures that actually removed funding that would have gone directly to students. How do you think we know that, of course, just funding is an issue, but how do you think that you could maybe work with the department to help to advocate for better funding mechanisms to be able to provide the support that you need?
Yes. So I'll say my predecessor, Corey, has been working on that for all of his 6 years that he was president in terms of, constitutional amendment or trying to do a GET tax increase. And so it's not an easy issue to deal with. We will have to work with our legislators. Hopefully it's a matter of bringing everyone together, not just working with one set, either the legislators or working with the governor or working with the superintendent. We need to all come together to solve this issue, really. And before the pandemic, we were kind of moving towards that, doing some salary studies. We've gotten shortage differentials to take care of those issues with regards to special education, Hawaiian immersion, and working out in hard to staff areas. And we just need to continue as we come out of this pandemic to look, what is it we need to do in order to continue to attract and retain teachers? And that funding is vitally important, and getting everyone on board to say, yes, this is what we need to do. It takes a village.
And speaking of that village, Ingrid Peterson has a question here today. She says, what can a voter do to help get more funding to public schools? Let's take Ingrid's question and kind of expand it out to what do you need from the public right now? You know, we talked on a practical level, you mentioned PPE and all the resources that teachers need right now. But as you know, we are a community and we want to support schools, whether you have a student in the public education system or not. What do you need from the public right now?
They need to speak out. And one of the positive things to come out of this pandemic is this virtual option, being able to interface from your home. So Neighbor Island people can participate in the process. They can call into the Board of Ed and give testimony. They've been able to give testimony at the legislature. Just making your voices heard is so important. And we're pleased to have, you know, Parents for Public Schools, other community groups that work to make things better. And so join up with those groups. We invite you to do that.
You know, before we let you go, this is your first time on this programming and people may not understand or maybe not know a whole lot about you. I'm wondering if you can share a little about your experience just in the educational workforce and what you've done here in the state of Hawaii that might help people to get a better context of your background.
Sure. I'm a Kaneohe boy, grew up in Kaneohe, graduated from Castle High School, went to the University of Hawaii Manoa, and got my secondary education in mathematics degree because I was inspired by my math teacher. I grew up in public housing, so school was something that kind of saved me. And I was so inspired that I wanted to just get in there. And I knew that there was a teacher shortage crisis back then as well. So I was like, what am I going to be able to do? I'm going to go get my degree, become a math teacher. And I wanted to be able to do the same thing that one of my teachers, Mr. Mizuta, was able to do, which was to inspire me and to save me from the life that I was living at home. And so I taught for a couple of years at Castle. I taught for a couple of years at McKinley High School, and then I became the registrar. And somehow here I am. I never expected it, but.
Well, before we let you go today, and we are looking forward to many more conversations with you over the next few months, what's your final message to parents and students as they head into the school year? Because we know it is approaching very fast.
Thank you for supporting the teachers. You know, it's been really hard. Oh, when this pandemic started, everyone was like, hey, teachers deserve a raise. Teachers, you know, give them whatever they want. And then, you know, time went on and people got tired. But, you know, teachers have been working so hard and doing innovative things. And please just let them know that you appreciate what they've been doing. They would love to hear that.
Okay. Osa Tui Jr., president of the HSTA, thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning. And again, we look forward to hearing from you in the future. Aloha.
My pleasure. Mahalo.
Aloha. Very interesting to hear from him. And you really hear that there is not the clear guidance that the HSTA and really families need right now when it comes to what school is going to look like. We see the guidelines evolving, and we know that the Board of Education is meeting next week to discuss more online learning options. Those have not all been hammered out. Right now, really in-person is where it's at, the DOE pushing everyone to get back in the classroom, but you have this variable of those students under 12 who can't get vaccinated, and we don't know exactly how many teachers have gotten their vaccines either.
Yeah, and regardless of the CDC ruling that came out this morning, you heard from him saying that the DOE has said that no matter what, mask wearing will be required on campus. So regardless of if you had your vaccination shot or not, be it teacher or student, that they will have that mask mandate in place moving forward. You can sort of hear also his vision for the future of the HSTA as he takes the reins as its leader, saying that one of the things that he wants to focus on is really making sure and ensuring that local students want to become local teachers, trying to invest in this next generation of teachers here locally to be able to provide the talents and the resources that they need to be able to succeed in the classrooms as teachers. And so he's really going to try to push that agenda while also, of course, dealing with the many other teacher shortage issues as well as funding that continues to be some of the biggest things and obstacles that our teachers have had to come over in this public education system.
Right, and he's taking over right at a time when there will be a leadership change at the Department of Education as well. Keith Hayashi, who will be on this program next month, is taking over as interim superintendent. So you have a change in leadership at his organization, and he says he's looking forward to working with Keith Hayashi, who, as we know, is a former principal, so has experience sort of on the ground right here in Hawaii, and that makes a difference. He says to his organization that they're looking forward to working together. So still a lot of variables right now, and school already for some complexes is in session. For the rest of the state, it's coming up. So we're going to be keeping an eye on this. And one person we'll be talking to about this is Governor David Ige. He'll be joining us on Monday. Does the new CDC guidance when it comes to mask wearing in schools change his thinking on what the DOE should do in that regard? We'll be asking him that 10:30 right here.
Yeah, I wish we had an hour to speak with the governor on Monday, because there's so much to get through. Of course, new changes that are being made here in the city and county of Honolulu, and what restaurants are now allowed to do. Of course, there's continued pushback about that benchmark of 70%. Will the state make any exceptions there? We've heard from those who work in the industry and the projections saying that it could take 4 months for the state to get to that level. We'll talk to the governor about that, as well as those bills that he vetoed, the overriding of the legislature, and moving forward, working with the legislature in what would be Governor Ige's last legislative session moving forward, how he plans to navigate those waters. Again, a lot to talk through with the governor, and that will be on Monday. We hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll see you right back here on Monday with Governor Ige at 10:30 for another show of Spotlight Hawaii. Aloha.
Aloha.